Now, as we begin talking about the scientific revolution, it would seem obvious that we would start with, well, some of those major figures of the scientific revolution. But to help make sense of what the scientific revolution was about, I want to start with two Greeks who preceded this period and, well, kind of screwed a lot of things up. Two Greeks who had a predominant influence on science in Europe in this time period were Aristotle and Ptolemy, and I'll take each one in turn. Aristotle believed that most of the world was made up of certain elements, and those elements determined how the world worked. So, for example, a stone is made up of the element of earth, and it would fall to the ground because it wanted to be closer to that which it was a part of. These elements helped explain, as far as he was concerned, all the physical properties of the universe. Ptolemy, a Greek astronomer, argued that the universe was geocentric. Geo meaning earth, so the earth was the center of the universe. And while these were Greek thinkers, what happened was over the centuries, they started to become enshrined with the power of tradition, if you will, and religion. Both sort of the love of the ancients and the Greek wisdom, as well as the Christian buttressing of some of these ideas, led them to be sort of deemed the scientific figures par excellence of the period. But as some scientists started to observe, their theories weren't exactly correct. And so some people started to challenge these Greek thinkers. One of the first to challenge was Nicholas Copernicus. He was a Polish clergyman and scientist who observed the universe as a way to try and explain and glorify God's creation. And what makes him so important is that he did not believe the world was a geocentric universe, but in fact was a helio or sun-centric universe. If you see here at the in terms of what he's holding in his hand, he is holding, if you will, a model of his helio or sun-centric universe. He wrote up his findings and published them, though it's telling that he published them after his death. He was still fearful of public reaction at that time to his theories, challenging so much of received wisdom. Following Copernicus were a number of other major figures of the scientific revolution. One was Tycho Brahe. He worked at an enormous observatory to make observations of the heavenly realms. He observed a comet, for example, in 1577. He observed a new star, a supernova, in the 1570s as well. And while Brahe never really came to firm conclusions or presented theories of his own, he left a massive amount of data, a massive amount of observable data about the universe. Probably the most famous figure of the scientific revolution is the next one we see, Galileo. Galileo also made observations of the universe, but he chose to use a telescope, an invention that made his observations much more accurate and more detailed. He discovered, for example, the moons of Jupiter and the rings of Saturn, and was drawing designs of what the moon looked like. Not a perfect sphere, not a perfect orb, but something covered in craters. Galileo is also most famous for the fact that his ideas, such as promoting Copernicus's theory of the universe, got him into trouble with the church. Eventually, he was brought before the Inquisition and forced to recant his views, though the story goes that after the inquisitorial trial, when he leaves, he mutters under his breath, "And yet she," meaning the earth, "still moves." That he sort of copped to get out of jail, but really he hadn't changed his mind. In terms of the scientific revolution, though, you can see growth upon growth. The next figure here, Johannes Kepler, was an assistant to Brahe, and what he does is take all that observable data that Brahe had left and started to systematize it. And one of the biggest things he comes away with is Copernicus is right, kind of. What he's getting across is that Copernicus believed that all of the universe were in perfect circles, that the sun was at the center and everything orbited in a perfect circle. But based on observable data, Kepler said, no, in fact, the orbits were not a perfect circle, but elliptical, representing the different orbits and paths that the different planets would be taking. And what you should see in this is, again, scientist building upon scientist. But By far, the most important scientific figure of the age is Isaac Newton. And I highlight here his most famous work, what's known as the Principia, where Newton distills down his findings. He brings about a mathematical understanding of the world in his Principia. It's the last sort of major scientific work published in Latin. It lays out his three laws of motion, for example, and it lays the groundwork for the belief in a clockwork universe. Simply put, God sets up the world along certain natural laws. He sets them up very much like a watch. He winds up the watch and then lets it run. Steps away, if you will, and lets the universe run. And so this is going to have a great deal of effect as we talk about the Enlightenment in terms of how people start to see themselves, see even God, because of some of these scientific developments. But since we're discussing the role of important individuals, I want to touch on one further point, and I'm using this image, a sculpture of Newton at Cambridge University, for this reason. When we tend to think of the scientific revolution, we think of major figures, major important people. We don't think so much about institutions. We just think about the particular man of genius, an apple falls on his head, etc., etc., etc. But it's important to realize that the state, that same state that was expanding across the globe, that same state that was building up militaries, that same state that was pursuing wealth in all its forms, was also actively aiding and supporting scientific endeavors. In England, the English Royal Society was established in 1662. In France, the Academy of Sciences was founded in 1666, actually by Colbert. And what you should see in this is an outgrowth of that same sort of mercantile spirit. Namely, the government realized that maybe by improving science, we can have a better state. Maybe we can have better armies. Maybe we can have better observations. Maybe we can have better trade. And so what you should see in this is, even though the scientific revolution is occurring in the realm of science, it is just as strongly influenced by the previous trends that we've been discussing.